Sodom and Gomorrah are two famous biblical cities exhibiting what happens when man loses touch with his soul and the attendant ethics that come with that and gives way to his darkest passions. Yet far from this being a symbolic and historic metaphor, it seems to me that the Western world has entered a form of Sodom and Gomorrah already. Now I know many who view this channel aren't Christians and don't have much sympathy with the Christian tradition. That's fine, but what I would say is, when we get rid of an ancient tradition, we run the risk of all sorts of dark forces which were once kept at bay coming back and really taking us over. One of those would be lust, maybe the most powerful of all the 7 deadly sins. It can be a subtle and insidious foe, and if you don't have the right spiritual armor to tackle it, it can take you, your family, and even your society and civilization over. This is why when I speak to friends in my personal life who may be having challenges with lust, I often say, take heart, we're going through a very difficult time in human history. Never before have men been tempted like they are now. Pornography is everywhere. Opportunities for sex are everywhere too. Yet this powerful foe of lust takes us over more and more every day, and no one in the mainstream seems willing to talk about it. If anybody brings it up, they'll be called a prude who wants to have shotgun weddings and the only thing is allowed is missionary sex with the lights off. Yet to me that's just a cheap method which excuses the dark lusts that have taken over our society, and I am going to exhibit those in this video, so if you are faint of heart, this might not be the one for you. But for those of you willing to soldier on, here's some stats regarding pornography. Apparently 37 pornographic videos are created every day in the United States. Every day 2.5 billion emails containing porn are sent or received, and 68 million search queries related to pornography are generated. Data also shows that youngsters have their first exposure to pornography at age 11, and up to 35% of internet downloads are pornographic. And some people may say, well, what's the problem? People are just enjoying themselves, aren't they? Well, the problem is addiction to a super stimuli. Studies are showing that now in one porn viewing session, an adult male will see as many naked women as his evolutionary ancestors would have seen in their lifetime. This means pornography works as a sort of drug on the brain, something similar to cocaine. Also, lawyers in America report that up to 56% of divorces have pornography as a reason. It would seem pornography is so insidious as it's largely hidden in the privacy of people's back rooms. However, like much of our modern world, the reality is obfuscated by a world of glitz and materialism where every pleasure can be met. Yet it seems that modern man is slowly learning a very important lesson, and that's that pleasure alone won't satisfy your soul. On top of that, we're building quite a big shadow side in our culture, and it's increasingly spilling out all over the place. Yet what compounds things here is we don't really have a defense against the increasing sexual machine. We don't have our tradition anymore, henceforth we can't really combat it. And because of this, instead of dealing with this problem, we just try and normalize it more and more, or at least certain actors do anyway. In one of the more bizarre stories of the year, Pornhub, that's the most or one of the most visited pornography websites in the world, has been bought out by a rabbi. The rabbi, who runs the questionably named Ethical Capital Partners Limited, says he wants to normalize pornography. Now, I'm sure alarm bells are ringing at YouTube HQ stating I'm some raging anti-Semite who just wants to blame Jews for pornography, but is this not strange? I mean, wouldn't we think it's odd if an imam bought Pornhub? What about if a priest did the same? We'd think that's very odd, wouldn't we? Seems to me this is very odd, and it's more than rational to question what on earth is happening. That doesn't mean I'm full of hate, it's a legitimate concern. But this is how modernity defends itself against everything. If you say anything against the liberal agenda or the liberal mindset, you are obviously full of hatred and anger. But I'm not quite sure how much more smut can be normalised in the Western mainstream. Here's a piece in the New York Post with a woman stating she's had sex with 480 people this year, but apparently she's very picky. She makes men fill out an application form. And they say romance is dead. And if that's not disgusting enough, here's a young woman gloating on TikTok about how she intends to copulate with 100 men in one day.
Morning, so today is the day where I get run through by 100 guys.
How many condoms I have?
I don't know about you, but I just find this so sad. Has no one ever said to this girl, you know, are you okay? I very much doubt there's a father on the scene there. Now, I'm not showing you these things purely for gratuitous reasons. I think it's important to understand the environment that our young people are growing up in. Not only do they see this sexual material regularly, they're also told to respect it as some form of quote-unquote sex work, which of course is just a euphemism for consensual abuse. And while I'm sure I'd be called a bigot by the liberals, it seems to me that this is why we need strong traditional men. They're the only people that can put a stop to this sort of nonsense and guide younger men to a more balanced, healthy path. But tragically that isn't happening, which is why you get bizarre stories such as this. A 14-year-old boy took his own life after falling in love with a Game of Thrones AI chatbot. And it's not much better at the top either. After the revelations concerning Jeffrey Epstein, we figured out how things work amongst the powerful in our society. Harvey Weinstein too proved himself to be an absolute creep in how Hollywood works. And now we have the ex-Abercrombie CEO who apparently used his power to traffic vulnerable men. Now, I'm aware that lust has always been a challenge for man throughout human history, but it seems at the moment we don't have any defense against it. In fact, more so, we're actively celebrating it. I'd say this is largely because of weak men taking over society due to corporate feminism, the feminists who think they're rebelling against the system but have ultimately created this mess. I mean, after all, it's not traditional or conservative men who wanted this, is it? But such men have been demonized decade after decade, and this is what you end up with. However, I believe it's time to start pushing back against this. That change has to begin within Western men themselves. In my view, the further we sink into this degradation, it breaks down men more and more. That means it's harder to have solid values, and that means it's harder to build solid families, and that means it's harder to build a solid society. So in my view, this is a major issue we're dealing with here, and I spoke a while ago about building a community on the back of this channel. It's something I've been looking into in the background for quite a while, and I have in the works. Now, as part of that, I'd like to build a forum where people can discuss the state of the Western world and politics and so forth, but I'd hope it can also be something positive for men to turn away from the excesses of modernity, especially young men who we're going to need for the next generation. It's my view that men and women need to be told that they actually matter, that turning away from this path of degradation will give them a much more positive life in the long run, and these immediate short-term pleasures end up corroding your soul as well as your community. But do watch this space. I'll try and have something out by the end of the year. Do let me know what you think down below, and do consider subscribing to the channel.